Hi, Glenn, and hi, John.
Greetings.
Hey, John. There's your background.
My background. All right. The most important chart ever created.
Yeah, I guess so. That's showing what is it? The extra cloud? Is it the ocean temperatures increasing?
The loss of clouds around the equator. Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, um, maybe you'd like to talk about that later.
Yeah, I definitely have something to talk about from a recent YouTube done by a new PhD graduate that Mir had on. It's very interesting. I actually challenged her conclusion, but she didn't quite understand my question, so I'll pose it to our group.
Okay. Okay, John. Okay. Well, uh, yeah, it's not quite 9 o'clock. So, yeah, Glenn, thank you for your emails. I'll start on the hour basically. Um, I've got it here, your list of section. Oh, no, you can't see it actually. So, let me just quickly share. So, I know to share the screen to share sound when we look at your video, Glenn. And so this is the this is the one for announcing the climate lab, isn't it?
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to foist this on everyone today. Um, Chris, you're aware that this one's going to be made public, are you? Going to send this one to be public. They're intervening. You weren't. We missed you at the end of the last one. Okay, as long as you know that. Um, and
I got chucked out the end of the last one and couldn't get back in.
I got chucked out.
Yeah, I got well somehow all the link went down and it just wouldn't reconnect anyway.
All right,
Never mind.
sorry about that. Anyway, yeah. Um, right. So that's it. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to suggest this as the first one, the first item on the agenda. And okay, well, it's 9 o'clock, and in UK time, that is. Hi, friends. Brian,
Hi,
Greg.
Glenn.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, friends. Yeah. So these meetings usually fill up. Very few people come on time. Um, but okay, this is the first one that we're going to make uploaded publicly, which means instead of getting about 5 views, it might get 100 views. Isn't that amazing? We can hope for more. Um, and these meetings are called NOAC, Nature-Based Ocean Atmospheric Cooling. And so why? And they've been going for about 3 years. They happen every 2 weeks, and anyone can attend these meetings. Absolutely anyone who is willing to conduct themselves in a sort of orderly fashion. We've had one borderline and one person that actually wouldn't shut up. And so very sadly we had to ban him. Um, so this is a chart I made. Well, I've made recently, just today actually. Well, it's a, a simpler version of other charts I've got here to show that since 1850, we know that greenhouse gases are warming the climate, but very relatively few people seem to understand that the pollution has had a cooling effect. Now, we don't like pollution, and it's getting cleared up. But the reason pollution has a cooling effect is it's aerosols, and aerosols affect clouds. It make them brighter. And there's other cooling effects as well, but mainly it's cloud interaction making clouds bigger and brighter. They reflect more sunshine away, and you can literally add these are they're not temperatures, they're sort of cooling or warming influence. It's the influence on the climate that's measured in watts per square meter. It's a bit of a scientific term. Um, and so the warming has a warming, warms up the climate and the cooling. You can just add them together. So we'll basically subtract the blue from the red, and you get this overall here. And so we can see that, at this, I looked at the years 1970, around about 1970. was the same. If there hadn't been any cooling effect, if there hadn't been any air pollution in 19, yeah, we had the warming effect we had, that the combination of the warming and the cooling in 1970 was the same as the greenhouse gases in 1870 were about the same. So what's that, about 0.36 sort of thing? That's a 0.36. So not very much. We're now up to 4.2 watts meter squared warming influence. So the point is, people say, "Oh no, 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 we're terrified, absolutely terrified of reflecting sunshine away." Well, why are you so terrified? It's been going on for since 1850, nearly 200 years, well, best part of 200 years. And if the aerosols, if the particles in the air could be a little bit less nasty, um, and we're working on things that are sort of food additives, to make these particles, then that could have a cooling. But obviously, you still need it can only work for a while because the system eventually gets overwhelmed. And so this is one example of our nature-based cooling. And of course, we read scientific papers. There's a whole lot of work that's been done by many, many, many scientists, and we like to talk about it. Right, so let's what else to say about NOAC meetings? We're part of the Healthy Planet Action Coalition. I'll show that website at the end. That's a group of about 200 people, a bit more than that now. Um, we have to suffer about 100 emails a day. We're just mostly the same people talking, but there's a lot of us adding on bits as well. Emails on things we've seen, things we're concerned about, things we think people should know about, learn about. Uh, One of the reasons I started, inviting people to these meetings was I noticed scientists getting very irate with each other, well, mostly being civilized, but sometimes getting irate with each other. And I thought, let's meet face to face. I want to see the faces behind these names. Um, and it's well, people are amazing, committed, experienced people. Many people here are. So I'm talking now about types of people. Many people are retired scientists, not necessarily retired, don't have to be. We've had students, we've had all kinds of people. Um, and it's important, one of the most important, I would say the most important thing I've learned in these meetings. We had Professor Stephen Salter for a while. Unfortunately, he died last year. But he was a real champion for marine cloud brightening, and he told us all the things we should be learning about that. So I know that certainly I've been learning a lot about clouds since he came along and gave us all his wisdom and shared all his files and his papers and so on. Right, but we're going to start with Glenn. And so the way these meetings start, there won't be this preamble every time next time. Um, Everybody here that attends these meetings knows that it's for them really. So it's for the people attending to suggest items for the agenda, and we speak for 90 minutes and we discuss those items, and I basically moderate and record and upload the recording, and that's pretty much it. And then just invite everybody next time. So, Glenn, having seen me saying that this is, we're going to start making them public every other one. So once a month they're going to be uploaded to YouTube publicly. Came along and said, well, and I said, you have longer. Last time, Glenn, I kind of cut him off after 10 minutes, and then there wasn't really much discussion. So I said, have 20 minutes. And Glenn's just done another video. And that's really probably the best. I think that's what you're suggesting. It's the best. That's how you want to present this, isn't it, Glenn? And yep. And then I've said, well, it's nicely organized into sections. What I'm going to suggest is, if you want to comment, I mean, the style of these meetings is very interactive rather than sort of long lecture and then, question at the end. So you might say a bit more chaotic, but I also teach. I'm actually not a professional scientist. Learning a great deal in the last, nearly 20 years, more than that. But I'm able to be freelance. I teach for a living. A lot of it's actually sitting in this chair doing remote teaching IT. Anyway, so that's how tends to work well, as people can respond and ask questions pretty much immediately. But I'm going to ask you to put up your hand, and then at the end of each section, if anyone's hand is up, then we'll take your comment at the end of the section. And there's a lot of sections um, to this video. Okay, so that's what we'll do. So who else? Who else would like? And so, yeah, good evening, Brew. Nice to see you again. Brew
Over.
Pierce, very much an ocean man. Robert Tulip, who's a very committed campaigner in Australia. John Nissen, uh, a British scientist, I guess, and Greg Slater. So, what do we want to talk about today? John, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, a recent presentation by Mir, and it's now available on YouTube, came to a amazing conclusion
Mir
that
is what's Mir, John, again? These are the sort of roof reflection people, aren't they? Yeah.
mirrors for Earth's energy rebalancing.
Yeah, great. Okay, keep going, please.
Anyway, they're a good organization with 10 or more members and lots of projects, two or three different big projects around the world. But this recent addition to their staff is a PhD graduate, and she came to this very interesting conclusion that her data showed the conclusion, but she didn't recognize it, which was changes in emissivity at the surface make almost no difference in planetary forcing, but changes in reflectivity at the surface make enormous changes. So I'd like to show you the data and point out this startling effect.
Okay. All right.
So
So
emissivity versus reflectivity might be the
I'm going to say startling conclusion, something like that, or insight, maybe insight,
sure.
insight, um,
It's not their
reflectivity.
insight. It's my own, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Reflectivity makes much more difference than just than emissivity. So uh, like a hot road emitting heat into the air is what you mean, isn't it?
Right.
Emissivity. Yeah. Okay. Got it, John. Thank you. Who else? Robert Tulip, please.
Um, I'd like to briefly introduce the talk that Sev Clark will give this week on marine nanobubbles.
Okay. Okay. Talk on
So
marine.
that's it's been advertised at the HPAC uh,
Right.
email list,
Got it, Seb
and
Clark. Yeah.
it should be a very interesting discussion.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Robert. Anything else? That would take long, unless we want to start talking about it here, but I think you probably want to leave it till your presentation, Sev. So that won't take very long. We might talk a lot about this. We've almost got, where are we now? So we've got an hour and 20.
Clive,
Yep, yep.
Greg Slater, if there's time, I'd be interested in the consensus of opinion on, um, well, ocean, ocean, God, I'm geezing, ocean fertilization, ocean and iron fertilization, or
Yeah,
the different
yeah,
ways it's characterized. You know, of course, Russ, what's his name?
George.
yeah.
Say again. Russ.
Russ
George.
George.
Russ
Russ
George.
George.
Yeah,
Yeah, back in 20 whatever, and that was a huge hoopla. And various claims have been made, including Russ, who's I'm not sure Russ. There's another Russ who's from the company. Who I've been in touch with.
hmm
Uh, but this is claims have been made. Huge claims have been made for the capacity of CO2 sequestration, and
hmm
And I just wonder what some of the people here who might be closer to it have as far as opinion of its capacity. And that's my
Got it.
question.
Yeah. Uh, uh, Capacity of CO2 sequestration.
And sort of the ease with which it can be done, because the
Yeah.
magnitudes of sequestration with relatively small infrastructure are dumping. I mean, there's huge claims to have been made, and
Yeah.
I just don't know enough yet to know how
Yeah.
realistic.
Okay, Greg.
Okay.
This has been discussed in the past, but quite a long time ago. I think we did actually talk about Russ George even last time,
Well,
but not too much about the capacity of CO2. And given that this is going to be public, Greg, this one.
yeah.
Let's
I
put
mean,
that in.
just if it's appropriate, you
Oh,
can.
it's good. No, no, no. I'm saying it's good. I'm just sort of speaking, so
Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
it's good. I wouldn't write it up there if I didn't think it was a good item. Okay, that's probably enough. That'll take us a long time to talk about. I do need to make sure that this gets aired at the end. Is there any last burning ideas about what to talk about? Okay, then. So let's go straight to. I need to actually come out of this and share with sound. So actually, Glenn, before I do that, would you like to say a few words, Glenn? This is your item, Glenn, please.
Sure. So yeah, my name's Glenn Weinreb, and we're setting up a new laboratory to tackle climate change. And so there's two parts to this. One is decarbonization, and the other is reflecting sunlight back into outer space. And we put together the script for 21 videos to summarize the lab and to help move it forward. And so what we're going to do today is play the first video that summarizes the lab concept. And there's about a dozen sections within the video. And so we can stop and then discuss each section or every couple of sections or so. We published two videos in the last 10 days. We expect to publish one video every 5 days or so. And so this first one is a summary, and the second video has more details on R&D. And also, we've got a video that summarizes radiative forcings. We have a video that summarizes how to reflect sunlight back into outer space. There's a video that looks at the cooling anthropogenic aerosol radiative forcing that gives us cooling that offsets the warming. So there's videos that summarize a variety of different concepts. And in total, they put together the case for more R&D to tackle climate change. And part of that is reflecting sunlight back in outer space. So what we're going to do today is play the first video, and Clive is doing that from his computer.
Yep. Okay. And I forgot to ask Glenn, what's your very briefly in sort of 3 or 4 words background?
So my father ran several laboratories, and he visited the laboratory evenings and weekends. So starting at age 6, I went into the lab with him. So between 6 and 18, I grew up in a research laboratory in a sense, and I developed a lot of things before going to college. I have an electrical engineering degree from MIT, and then I started a company at MIT that designs and manufactures computer hardware and software products that automate research laboratories and factories, and helped set up thousands of R&D facilities over 35 years running that company. And now there's a publishing company in the electronic industry called AspenCore. We publish EE Times, Electronic Design News, Power Electronics. And within AspenCore, there's this organization called the Climate Solutions Research Center. I'm the director, which means I publish articles on so-called climate solutions.
Okay.
And then there's other things that I do too, but that's, let's say, a summary.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Glenn. Sev, I see you have your hand up. Can we wait till later, or is it?
Could you tell people how we use the chat in these conversations?
Uh, well, people just click the chat button. We're not going to have any new people this time, I don't think, Sev. So I think
Yeah.
people they know how to use.
Chat is text. That's typing text. That's not necessarily chatting verbally.
Yeah, that's what you mean, isn't it, Sev? Just click
Yeah,
the
and
chat
putting in
button.
URLs and things like that,
Yeah,
comments.
that's right. So there'll be in the description. I always put the chat from the meeting in. So there's a lot of helpful URLs that people contribute during the meeting. Often it'll be requested. Yeah, that's great. Good. Thank you, Sev. Right, so let's share sound and share screen. And I've got this set up here somewhere. There we are. So it's called Announcing the Climate Lab. Okay, here we go.
Hi, my name is Glenn Weinreb, and today we're announcing a new YouTube channel called The Climate Lab. We're a group of alumni from MIT who are interested in setting up a laboratory that prevents runaway climate change. More specifically, this lab would conduct R&D to the extent required to prevent the activation of climate tipping points. These are critical thresholds in Earth's systems that, once crossed, trigger abrupt changes. The first to go would probably be North Pole sea ice. It is roughly 2 meters thick, and once it melts, sunlight would be absorbed by water instead of being reflected by sea ice. And, according to scientists, this would increase the average global temperature by 0.6 degrees Celsius. And that's just the beginning. Over the next 100 years, we can expect to see several meters of sea level rise. After the first tipping point activates, others are likely to follow, like a chain of falling dominoes. This is sometimes referred to as runaway climate change, and yes, it could be bad. Think less food production, mass migration, and widespread disruption. We believe a surge of R&D in key areas can help prevent this, and in our videos, we'll explain how. For us, this hits close to home. Much of the MIT campus is built on landfill, which means it would be the first to go. This shows what 2 meters of additional water would do. Obviously, this would be bad. "30 years ago, scientists suggested we can solve the climate problem by replacing coal, oil, and natural gas with green energy. However, it seems like we have progressed beyond the point where this will solve the problem. To get a better sense of this, we can use the MIT Climate Solutions simulator to see what would happen if a global tax caused the cost of fossil fuel to double. According to the software, this would reduce the average global temperature anomaly at the end of the century from 3.3 degrees Celsius to 2.9. And we would still get runaway climate change. These temperatures refer to the increase from pre-industrial times 150 years ago. Okay, what about adding a worldwide $200 per ton tax on carbon dioxide to roughly quadruple the cost of fossil fuel? Would this help? Nope. We still get runaway climate change. Okay, so what does this mean? In a nutshell, this means fixing climate is more complicated than reducing carbon dioxide. Furthermore, typical energy policies promoted by conservatives and typical energy policies promoted by liberals are both too small to influence tipping points in either direction. In other words, liberals are not helping and conservatives are not hurting. All of this is another way of saying Mother Nature is larger than your typical government policy. part of the problem is journalists report on existing climate initiatives without quantifying their impact on the planet. For example, a news story might cover a new solar farm and suggest it will help bears, penguins, rice farmers, and people who are late to work. But leave out the fact that even if the world built these up to the level where they supply all electricity when sunny, it would have little impact on tipping points. There are several techniques for quantifying the impact of so-called climate remedies, one of which is to use a climate simulator. However, few journalists are familiar with these techniques, and this has led to a distorted view of the problem and the solution. To prevent runaway climate change, we probably need to reflect approximately 1% of sunlight back into outer space to cool the planet and offset global warming. In theory, this could be done with airplanes that spray reflective gases into the upper atmosphere. To get a sense of what 1% looks like, we placed a white bar in this image and then made it 10% transparent, followed by 1%. As one can see, 1% is barely visible to the naked eye. It would cost little money to conduct reflectivity experiments and look for harm. For example, an experimental spray plane could inject material into the upper atmosphere, and a monitor plane could visit the site once a day for several weeks. Multiple parameters could be measured by flying above the material, below the material, and through the material. Reflecting sunlight is not popular. However, as the climate crisis worsens, our society will be pushed in this direction, in addition to reducing carbon dioxide. This raises important questions. Can we reflect sunlight without causing harm? How much would this cost? Can we run small-scale tests in a limited part of the sky to measure side effects? We'll explore these questions as we compare reflecting sunlight with not reflecting sunlight. Unfortunately, we may also have a timing problem. By the time we act, it could be too late. We'll talk about that too. Currently, the world spends approximately $4 trillion on fossil fuel each year. This includes $2.5 trillion for oil, $1 trillion for coal, and $0.5 trillion for natural gas. If we switched over, this money instead would be used to produce green energy. Or, more precisely, it would pay down the mortgage on facilities that produce green energy. These are big numbers, and we'll look at the economic forces that would be needed to push this forward. According to basic principles of economics, there's only one way to decarbonize worldwide within a reasonable amount of time. And that is to do R&D to the extent required to drive down the cost of 24/7 green energy to below that of fossil fuel. This is not being done. However, it could be done. And this would cost little relative to costs typically associated with climate. Each decarbonization initiative can be summarized with three key parameters: the cost to society, the amount of carbon dioxide reduced, and the cost per ton. In theory, economists can estimate these for each decarbonization initiative and identify the lowest cost approach. But in practice, this is rarely done. Yet why not? Why is our society inept at tackling climate? Is it possible our fundamental approach to this problem is flawed? And if so, what might be a better approach? If we instead pursued an engineered approach, where the lowest cost solution is favored, what might that look like? In later videos, we'll do a deep dive on what it means to tackle climate at the lowest cost. A plan that decarbonizes over several decades would involve both speed and scale. It would not look at building one nuclear fission reactor, and instead would support building thousands. Also, it would not look at building one experimental fusion reactor 10 years from now, and instead would support achieving economic fusion within several years, given a very large R&D budget. No one has ever presented a plan that solves the entire climate problem, let alone at the lowest cost. But in theory, a website could generate a plan based on criteria specified by the website user. This website does not exist. However, it could be built. President Biden issued $93 billion in climate-related loan guarantees during the last few months of his presidency. This level of funding is probably needed to solve the entire climate problem with additional R&D. However, it would need to be focused on the right areas and managed responsibly. We'll look at how this might be done. Let's take a break from climate and look at politics. Nations are dominated politically by large industries that employ millions of people. Examples are the fossil fuel industry, labor unions, automakers, and factories. Climate, in comparison, employs few people and is therefore politically weak. In a sense, large industries are political gorillas, while climate is a small monkey. But surprisingly, this is not a problem. That might sound strange, but it can be explained. Preventing runaway climate change, for real, primarily involves two activities at large scales. One is decarbonization, and the other is reflecting sunlight. For each activity, there are two phases, R&D and operations. Political opponents cannot block R&D since it can be funded by a handful of environment-friendly governments and foundations. Also, political opponents cannot block decarbonization operations if the green option costs less than the carbon option. And political opponents are not likely to block reflecting sunlight since runaway climate change would be bad for business. Also, for very little money, researchers can calculate how to avoid tipping points at the lowest cost to society. Wade Smith's excellent paper is an example of this. All of this suggests a path forward exists, and it is not blocked by politics. Also, if we get the right assignments to scientists and engineers, practically everyone else can relax, while a relatively small group of people handle this. Unfortunately, our society does not have a plan to solve the climate problem. It does not evaluate the cost and impact of decarbonization initiatives. It does not have a mechanism that favors the lowest cost approach, and no one feels responsible for solving the entire problem. Perhaps the last point is the most relevant. Can we make someone or some organization responsible for fixing this? And if so, what might that look like? We've developed a business plan for an organization that could do this. This plan is open source, which means it can be shared, edited, and used freely. To see it, click on the link in the description below. Retired General David Petraeus is considered to be one of the most effective military thinkers of our time. He has held top positions within the U.S. military, in addition to leading the Central Intelligence Agency. He advocates a four-step process when solving complex problems. Step 1 is to figure out the big ideas and get them right. Step 2 is to communicate those ideas. Step 3 is to implement. And step 4 is to adjust as needed. It is our intent to apply the Petraeus method to climate. The big ideas are drive down the cost of green energy with R&D, figure out how to reflect sunlight with R&D, develop a website that calculates what needs to be done and when to achieve an objective, and conduct decarbonization and reflectivity operations at reasonable cost. With communications, we have videos at this YouTube channel, a free document that describes 8 divisions within a proposed laboratory, each with about 7 focus areas, and a free summary spreadsheet that helps people figure out what they want to do within each division. To implement, we need wealthy individuals to specify A, what they want to develop, and B, who they trust to oversee the development. For example, someone might choose to put X dollars into area Y, Z dollars into area P, and have organization so-and-so oversee the development. So that's it. That's our strategy. MIT teaches scientists and engineers how to solve problems. But when it comes to climate, they need to do better. They need to focus less on the trees and more on the forest. More specifically, they need to identify the R&D that can solve the entire problem to the extent needed to prevent runaway climate change. Our lab business plan is one example of how this could be done. A lab that solves the entire climate problem would involve tens of thousands of scientists and engineers. Many MIT alumni have experience running large organizations and are therefore well suited to help set this up. For this reason, we're calling on MIT alumni worldwide to help us. The situation is dire, yet not impossible, and it's time for scientists and engineers to rise to the challenge. And in future videos, we'll look at how this might be done. Okay, that's it for me, and I'll talk to y'all real soon.
Okay. Welcome those who've just joined. That was the first item. And I was going to stop if there were hands up, but no, again, nobody's got anything to say. Any comments now, people, from that video? Yeah, Brew, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All sounded very well-meaning, but you're missing 50% of the problem. I recently attended the Global Tipping Points conference, and the overwhelming consensus was that the coral reefs are now passing their tipping point. Ocean acidification is reaching and passing its tipping point. The biologic makeup of the oceans is tipping in its completion. Our soils are passing a tipping point, are in a dire state. And the rest of the biota, the forests of the planet and the phytoplankton makeups are all deeply eroded. 550 billion tons of missing carbon with life locked onto it, active carbon. So the plan needs to be inclusive and look at the whole problem. You can't fix any problem if you don't look at how the system worked in the first place and you don't fully identify what is wrong. So fundamentally, there's a misdiagnosis there. The patient is a lot sicker than I picked up from that video that you just produced. Now, you may have all this in place and you can't put everything in, and I know it's really hard to do that. But there is a danger in presenting a plan where you've got huge chunks of it missing. And I think that is incredibly important that you broaden it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Brew. Do you want to come back on that at all, Glenn?
Sure. So one thing the lab what we're looking at doing is one of the divisions is to develop policy-making tools, which is a website where the website user can specify a climate model, specify objectives, and then the website can calculate how to achieve those objectives. And so you can get involved in all sorts of other things. Now, that website's quite complicated. The video doesn't, it refers to it, but it doesn't spend a lot of time on that. And then there's other videos that go into more detail. So this video is a overall summary. It's not much detail.
Hmm.
Let's see, we have Robert Tulip has a question.
Yeah.
We have
Yep. Robert, please.
Robert.
Glenn, the box that you showed suggesting that it would be difficult to block both R&D and field testing. I didn't think that was.
We're losing you, Robert. Can you just say that again, please?
We're losing your audio, Robert.
Yeah, you've got red bars on your Wi-Fi.
He's talking about blocking SAI experiments, I believe. You thinking?
Well, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Coming through now.
Robert, you sound good.
The box that you showed suggesting that it would be difficult to block both research and development and deployment of sunlight reflection technologies. I did not think that that was at all realistic, because the current situation is that there are active political movements to do precisely that, to block any to block both research and testing. So I didn't feel that your overall assessment was sufficiently engaged with the political problem.
Right. So the thinking is, if you need to do, let's say, some R&D, and you've got high net worth individuals, you have foundations, you've got governments that are supportive of climate change, they can support R&D funding. Now, I know the National Science Foundation, right now, the budget is similar today as it was a year ago. And so that hasn't changed much, but it certainly changes in U.S. government policy. But you've got everybody else that can support R&D. So what I'm thinking is, with the sources that are supported, they've got some work to do. And then if you're running a field experiment, then the question is, well, where are you flying your airplane from? You've got to go somewhere in the world where you can run your experiments. And so if one nation is not supported, you've got to go to another nation. So my view is, if you've got a funding source, you should be able to move forward. Let's see, we have another.
If I could just follow up. Also, I think you've used the term decarbonisation. Now, I understand decarbonisation to mean reform of the economy to shift to low emission energy sources, but that's only a really very small part of the carbon problem, because the carbon problem is principally the committed warming from past emissions. And decarbonisation of the economy doesn't actually do anything about committed warming or essentially mining the carbon from the air that's needed to restore Holocene atmospheric composition.
Right. So if you've got a website, let's say a policymaking tool website, and your objective is to, let's say, prevent the first tipping point from tipping over, and let's say you define that. I understand it's a bit complicated as to how you define tipping points, but let's say you're trying to block the collapse of North Pole sea ice and South Pole sea ice. And then you can, let's say that's your objective, and let's say the website user specifies a climate model that they trust, and you can calculate what you'd have to do to achieve that objective. So you can calculate the percent of sunlight that you need to reflect back in outer space by a certain time. And so all these things can be calculated. And it's true, you can do a lot of decarbonization activity, but you still get runaway climate change. You still have average global temperature just increasing over time. So carbon dioxide is one piece of the puzzle. And then it is interesting, with the En-ROAD simulator, you can look at what happens if you increase the cost of fossil fuel by a factor of 4 worldwide, and the temperature still keeps going up. You still get runaway climate change, even with dramatic decarbonization policy. You can say, well, why is that? It's like, well, there's a variety of things happening, one of which is you've got carbon dioxide already in atmosphere. Another thing is you've got the the warming rate is at 0.3 degrees C per decade or so. And the climate scientists 30 years ago said avoid 1.5 degrees C global temperature increase. And when they say avoid, they mean you want it to go up, peak at 1.5 and then drop back down. And if you peak at 1.5 and drop back down, it means that the slope, the warming rate's at 0. But our warming rate's not at 0, it's at 0.3. So the whole thing is goofed up as far as solving this problem with decarbonization. So that's why you get into reflecting sunlight back into outer space.
Yeah, I think we broadly agree with that. And Robert's pointing out, yes, what about the carbon already in the atmosphere? Okay, thank you. And Greg, please.
Was
Greg?
Nadia?
I think Nadia was.
Oh, sorry, Nadia. Hello, Nadia.
Hi. No problem. No
Yeah, please
problem.
say very briefly, 2 or 3 words. What's your background?
Oh, my background, I've been working with Peter Eisenberger on carbon dioxide removal, how to further and how to combine it in projects that bring more benefits than just for climate. That's kind of my focus.
Great.
And actually, that's also where my feedback is going. I really like the video for educational purposes, but I think it's making things very simple and not really putting everything in there. And on one side, you're saying that one is supposed to look into the best solutions. On the other side, you're missing a lot of them in there. I think it's maybe more clever and important that one concentrates on the things that one really knows well and goes into them rather than trying to put everything into 16 minutes. So like I said,
it was just an introductory video, Nadia. It was, I don't know if you saw at the beginning, Glenn was saying that there's a lot more videos to come to go into more detail.
But it did say, what did it say? Decarbonization and sunlight reflection, which I think both items are obviously important, but that's not all of it. And so I think it's really dangerous to put out stuff like that, especially from very known institutes and universities, and not look at the full picture. I think the video was great educationally, but it's dangerous to put stuff like that out if it's not complete.
Okay, got that. Thank you. And your name looks very familiar. I think you must have done a lot of work that gets circulated around, Nadia. Okay, Greg, please.
Yeah, first, thank you for presenting the video. I like the idea in particular. I have some reservations similar to Nadia's and perhaps Robert's. But I like the idea of recruiting from the MIT alums. I think I haven't heard that sort of approach before, and there's a shitload of them, and there's a lot of smart people out there. If you can get interest that way in people, and through them getting access to contributions, because there's a lot of rich MIT grads too. So I think that's a good idea. There's a lot of people here and in these organizations who are desperately trying to convince people with either power or money to focus more on cooling in one way or the other. So that there's a lot of people trying to get attention. But I do like your approach of targeting MIT grads as a particular avenue. I would also agree that, I'm actually a hard over advocate for SAI, which is reflection, but there are people here who would tell you all about other techniques who they would argue are the places to start from. So again, if you want a full comprehensive sort of layout of the solutions that are being approached, you would probably want to go beyond just sunlight reflection. And anyway, those are my comments for you.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, I pointed that out to Glenn as well. Do you want to come back at all, Glenn, on that?
Sure. So the intent with one of the divisions of the laboratory is to develop the policymaking tools, which is the website that takes an objective. Let's say you're trying to block the collapse of North Pole sea ice, and then look at all the different ways of achieving the objective. Okay, and let's say there's dozens of them, and so it looks at those, and then also calculates a cost. And then if the website user says, "Tell me how to achieve the objective at lowest cost," then it would focus on the lowest cost approach. So if that's method X instead of Y, then it focuses on X. So that the intent is to develop the policymaking tools that take into consideration all the different factors, all the different issues, and all the different so-called remedies, and cost them, and then put together a plan based on an interaction with the website user.
Right. So the video wasn't saying this is the only way. It was just giving one example of a way of doing cooling.
Yeah, the video is a brief summary. There's another 20 videos. We've written a script for 20 videos, and each video is 90 to 99% complete. And so we're going to be publishing videos every couple of days.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, thank you. And Herb, please.
First, I thought it was really well done, very thoughtful, lots of innovative approaches there, and my hat's off to you. And what I'm about to say may be irrelevant given the fact that you said all the videos are 99% complete. But I have to agree with Robert Tulip and others and emphasize even more strongly that what came across explicitly and implicitly is this kind of technocratic approach that ignores politics. Well, if we get the lowest cost, we don't need to worry about politics. Well, we've certainly seen that. We can't not see that in our own country, in the United States, where Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about the cost of anything. It's all ideology and paybacks and blah, blah, blah. So again, it sounds like it's way too late, but my plea to you would be that take the framework you have now and instead of doing everything you can to eliminate and banish politics, do the exact opposite and integrate the political. And by political, I don't necessarily mean partisan political, so that comes into it, but political in the sense of people's different values, different perceptions, the whole issue of social acceptance of SRM is the biggest problem, et cetera, et cetera. So I would strongly, though it sounds like it's way too late, but that would be my unsolicited advice.
Okay, Glenn.
So the intent is to drive down the cost of green energy so that it's less expensive.
Are you banishing politics? Are you banishing politics from your videos?
You know, what's interesting is it's my belief that the politics is not the problem. That's my belief. I know it sounds strange. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. It's not that I'm an advocate of Trump, but no, the reasoning behind this is it's the intent of the lab to drive down the cost of green energy to below that of fossil fuel. If you don't do that, you could say, oh, there's a political problem. Well, my view is no, that's not it. You have people who want to not pay a green premium, okay, because they don't benefit by reducing their own carbon dioxide emissions. Instead, they want everybody else, the 8 billion people on the planet, to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions.
Okay, so you're saying politics is not really the problem, it's more in economics that's the main problem.
Right. In economics, this is referred to as the prisoner's dilemma problem. So you've got that. To beat that and to deal with the politics, you need the cost of green energy to be less than that of fossil fuel-based energy, and then you need R&D to do that. And then after you do that, the politics is not blocking people who are inclined to take market share away from people who are, let's say, involved in fossil fuel. So this is my view, that it's not politics that we need; it's putting money into the right places.
Right. I think that's interesting to think about that. You know, is it really, we worry about politics, but is it really politics? Is it economics? I won't answer that. Brew, please.
Yeah, Glenn, the cost of clean energy, solar and wind, is already well lower than hydrocarbons, but that's being held in place politically. Perhaps one needs to be thinking about the rules of the game. I mean, at the moment, hydrocarbons are heavily subsidized. If we had a level playing field, clean energy would be moving forward very, very fast anyway. But dealing with realities, we have a global financial system, whole earth system accounting, which isn't fit for purpose. At the moment, we talk about growth, but that growth includes all those unfunded liabilities of the cost of fossil fuel, the damage that we do. And yet it's driven by profit. And actually, if you can get the campaign to get the ground rules right, I think you're absolutely right. It's a commercial issue. But what we've got to do is show commerce and big money that there is enormous value in restoring our biosphere and recovering the atmosphere to proper levels, which bring us into radiative balance. I mean, as we stand, all assets are at risk. So there's a massive messaging problem that you need to put in place. And looking at its base, laws to protect our environments are absolutely critical. And once you put those in place, then those economic structures automatically change because all the contingent cost comes on the back of the polluters. So there's critical elements to it to add there. Yes, I believe we need absolutely every tool in the box. I think the situation is completely dire. But a huge part of the way out of that, very large scale land restoration, soil restoration, ocean restoration, and that brings back productivity and that increases land value and that makes massive profit. And that's how we'll draw people in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Brew. Ron, let's go to Ron and then we'll come to you, Robert, please. Ron first, please. Are you there, Ron? Ron. Okay, I think Ron.
Yeah, there I am. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I have a really, I'll get my, there we go. Sorry, it's always hard for me to unmute. I would like to make it an objection to the distinction between politics and economics. Can you guys hear
You're an
me?
economist, aren't you? You're a professor of economics, aren't you, Ron? Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm a heterodox economist, which means that my vision of economics is very, very political. That it's, the mainstream discipline of economics is in large part legitimation theory for capitalism, which is a political ideology. In other words, this is the only and best and unique system, and we have to. So, and capitalism, in my view, is a class system that is not the best, that needs to be improved upon. So I would, and this is all, but my main objection. So I think this, I kind of following up on Herb here. I think that in fact, the major driver of the response at this point, I think, may turn out to be overwhelmingly political. That is, if we are able to avoid disaster and cool the planet quickly within the next 25 years, we really need to do this, significant cooling. My guess is it would, and we've, many of us in HPAC and others have, we've had people talking about this and stuff. It would be driven by politics. That is, by the recognition by great powers or coalitions of countries or whatever, that we can't put up walls, that, we can't drive people away with armies. We can't let people sink in the Caribbean or whatever because we don't want immigrants. We have to deal with the fact that a large part of humanity is going to be desperate to find a place to live and is going to be banging down the walls to get to places where people are still kind of eking out some kind of comfortable living or quasi-comfortable living. And this is, they will realize that, SAI or some, other, that seems to be far and away the most likely in terms of costs and efficiency and near-term uniform cooling or more, that is so much of a better option than all these other options of, just kind of brute, what's the famous Hobson, whatever, brutality and ruthlessness. And, I'm going to save my people or my family or my whatever and let everyone else go to hell. So it was Hobbes or, the rule of brutality. Anyway, so that's, I just wanted to throw that in there because I find that I sent an article by Mike, actually, I haven't read it, but, this technocratic thing that's so dominant among our engineers and technology in the U.S. and particularly in Silicon Valley, they've allied with Trump and so forth, and tried to promote this vision of a post-political future that's all driven by, the geniuses of technology, figuring out everything. I just find it very, very unrealistic and implausible. And, of course, I have other objections. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Glenn is saying if it's cheaper, if it saves money,
Right.
Yeah,
So you can run the numbers on, if you're decarbonizing the world over 30 years, you can run the numbers on what kind of activity and what kind of scale you need. It's a fantastic amount of scale. And then you can look for examples of where have we seen large scale activity. An example of that would be China in year 2024. They built 280 gigawatts of solar power in 1 year. Now you have 4 watts of solar power that equals 1 watt of nuclear power because the sun burns bright roughly 6 hours out of every 24. So the China's solar construction is similar to 70 gigawatts of nuclear.
No, but I'm not against markets or against using. In fact, I have a whole on this on the need to mechanisms to drive a massive transfer of wealth and technology from the rich to the poor, and that's the only practical way to do it within global capitalism, which is going to persist for the next, many decades probably. So I'm not trying to pretend that we can totally be oblivious to costs and those factors, but I'm just saying that, in terms of the actual cooling emergency that we face, if we were to actually think about, how this could possibly come about, to be addressed, it's likely to be politics. It's likely to be driven absolutely by politics. And all this stuff about the cost of yes, to get to the carbon-free future, we need to drive things through markets and so forth, at least in the next few decades. Absolutely agree with that, but that's
all
not.
right. Thanks, Ron. Okay,
Yeah.
we've got more items to get through, and so let's just have Robert Tulip, and then I think we're going to need to move on. Robert, please.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, Glenn, in your reply to my last question, I think you missed the point, which is that decarbonisation is not an accurate description of the broader carbon action that is needed. Decarbonisation only refers to restructuring of the energy sector, and it says nothing about the primary carbon problem of committed warming from past emissions. So I just think that use of the label decarbonisation to cover all of carbon action is incorrect language.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll put the a PDF file in the chat window, which is the 21 videos that are being worked on. They're summarized. They're the script or the draft and script is in a PDF. Also, I'll put a PDF into the script window. That's the business plan for the new lab. If anybody's interested in more information, they're welcome to look those documents over.
That's
and
great.
I want to thank everybody for your time and your comment.
All right. Yeah. And thank you, Glenn. I agree with Herb. It's I tried to make just one video, and it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of skill. And you've got that you've done quite a number already. And I think we're very much all of us we're not exactly on the same page. Nobody ever is, but mostly we're on the same page. And so what I keep saying is we need to collaborate effectively. The problem is enormous. Nobody can solve this on their own. And the bad news is that we have to actually talk to each other and collaborate because you can't do it on our own. And I think that there's a lot of great thinking there, and it's not perfect. And that's why you've risked an audience like us to get the feedback. You want to hear the feedback. So thank you very much, Glenn. It's mighty impressed. You're welcome here anytime. I was just going to say my own thing. A website that you can ask anything. I'm using. We talk here about using AI. I mean, I find AI. You can ask it any question. It's not perfect, far from it, but it's still helpful. Anyway, I think it's the other. You're going to say Did you want to add something, Brian, before we move on to John?
Yes, just as a quick
oceanographer, Brian. Go for it. Sorry, yeah. Go for it.
Well, I'm a executive director at the Climate Foundation, and what I wanted to just add to what Robbie had said is that I think one good way of framing this is that if we work to regenerate a healthy climate, we can address all 3 legs of the Climate Triad, and that includes emissions to zero. It includes 2,400 gigatons of greenhouse gas removal, and it includes climate repair. And by working on all 3 of those, we can work to regenerate a healthy climate for everyone in the world in our lifetime.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Okay, that's great. So let's move on to John, please. John Cole, please, talking about mirror. Which is the mirror reflection, people putting kind of shiny things on poor people's roofs in the third world and things like that. You're saying that, yeah, somebody gave you an insight that reflectivity makes much more difference than emissivity, John, please.
Right, right. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, and you can see the screen?
Yep.
Great. So, yeah, I've been working on emissivity and reflectivity projects, and I was never fully aware of something that was pointed out in this beautiful video by this PhD graduate, and we'll go through it. So, if you zoom out and you look at the simplicity of forcing, you get the incoming heat and light, and then you get the emissivity of the Earth. And let's say we reflect 30% of what comes in as visible light. It goes out with reflection. That means that the other 70% goes out as some other kind of emission. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot. So you'd think that if you increased emissivity of the ocean, let's say, or the land, that you might be able to take advantage of that 70% of the power or energy that's going out as emissivity. In other words, you could cool the planet with emissivity. Mm-hmm. But it turns out there is a problem with that, and it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they created a careful study.
John, isn't the problem that it comes out as infrared, which gets trapped, and that's the whole thing about the greenhouse effect? Isn't that what it is?
Essentially, yeah. But they refined it quite a bit.
Okay.
So they went through a bunch of materials: concrete, roofing shingles, perfect reflectors, black body that you see down at the very bottom there. So a perfect reflector has 100% reflectivity and 0 emissivity. And then there's another device that they call a perfect RC that has both perfect reflectivity and perfect emissivity. And then at the very top, the top 3 are the specialty materials that have multiple layers of metals, exotic metals, and they're very good reflectors and very good emitters. So then they went through and made a calculation, for instance, on this. Here's one of those specialty materials. And they're expensive to produce, but they do a great job of moving energy into the microwave window or other places where it can escape from the Earth. And then and then here's to your point that you mentioned earlier. The problem with emissivity at the surface is that almost none of it makes it out. It has to go up to the clouds, get absorbed, re-radiated back down to the ground, go back up again. And then that small red pipe that you see on the right is the little bit that actually makes it up to the top of the clouds or the top of the atmosphere.
Can you point to it, John? Point to that little pipe going up.
I don't know if you can see my...
That's it. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Emissivity all occurs, 95% of it occurs at the top of the clouds or the top of the atmosphere in the upper layers. The stuff that comes from the surface gets totally tied up. So if you were to increase the surface emissivity by 10%, you would not cool the Earth by 10%. Most of it would get trapped in that cycle you were talking about with the greenhouse gases and the moisture and stuff.
Okay. Where's this going, John? Where's this going? Do they have a solution?
Yes. So this is another chart that shows for all those materials they listed before, what is its actual cooling power to get the heat all the way off the planet and out the top of the atmosphere. And it turns out that the perfect reflector, even though it has no emissivity, is an excellent device. And so here's a chart showing the results of that thing we just had. The farthest right that you see, the XIV, is the perfect reflector, which has no emissivity. And it turns out that it is better than all of those specially made materials in all those labs that are very expensive to produce with exotic metals at actually getting energy out the top of the atmosphere. So That means that cheap reflectors made out of essentially aluminum, possibly with a coating on them, possibly not, will do as good a job because they reflect, and the visible light can get out and won't get tied up in that infrared thing we saw where all of the energy. So this is really important because there's a lot of money going into develop these exotic materials for cooling, but it doesn't really matter because the cheaper ones can do it. The only place that the cooling of emissivity occurs is at the top of the atmosphere or at the top of the clouds. For instance, decreasing the cirrus clouds would allow slightly more emissivity to occur. But all of the cooling will occur from reflectivity for the lower parts of the atmosphere, not emissivity increases.
Right. That's very interesting. Okay. Thank you very much, John. Right. Sev, please.
Yeah, just to say, John, that air is a hell of a lot cheaper than metal, and nanobubbles are a very, very good reflector at the sea surface. Why not go that way?
Sure. I mean, anything that can cause reflectivity at any level of the atmosphere is great, whether it's the surface or higher up. It's just that the funny thing is more millions or billions are being spent on trying to create highly emissive materials than are on, for instance, your nanobubbles. In other words, for some reason, industry has fixated on the idea that we need a better reflector that also does emission, but they don't. It actually, for global cooling, it doesn't make any difference. If you can make something for $1 per square meter that's 100% or 99% reflective, you're better off than something that's $1 per square centimeter that also has 95% emissivity.
Okay. Right. Thank you. And Greg, please.
John, that's very interesting. Just first of all, a perfect. How do you define a perfect reflecting mirror? I mean, is that across the entire incident solar spectrum, or is that across visible? And the other part of the question is, I thought part of the effort of in a technical approach was to shift some of the spectrum that would have not shift part of the energy to one of the windows where it can then emit through the atmosphere, and I don't know if they try to eliminate the reflective portion. It's just I thought they were trying to shift some of the absorbed energy by some technical means into a band that has a window out of the atmosphere. So those are my two questions.
Right. It turns out that if you look at the cost to benefit ratio of trying to make a material to shift, let's say 20% of the infrared energy in its environment into some kind of a window, a certain small bandwidth, and which has less interference as it's trying to go out the atmosphere, the cost benefit ratio is poor, instead of just putting out more reflectors that don't try.
That makes sense. That makes sense, John. Yeah. Address the Greg's other question, then I think we need to move on. And then we'll have Brian as well.
The other question was just, the perfect reflector you're saying is the cheapest way to go? Perfect being it reflects at every wavelength that it hits it's reflected. That's perfect, or just it reflects perfectly in the visible window, or what exactly?
Well, in real life, you can't get 100% under all of the wavelengths. But if you integrate under the curve for standard materials like aluminum and stuff, you can get pretty high. You can get to maybe 97%. It's a little weak on certain wavelengths, but those don't reflect the majority of the energy that you're trying to deal with.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, yeah, very good. Okay, and Brian, please.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on a natural reflector that's better than perfect. I mean, it's great to identify the surface reflectance when it can be done. But using Jonathan's nice chart, you can see there's 340 watts coming down to the clouds, and then 100 bounces back up, and then 160 makes it down to the surface. And so nature's reflector are the clouds. And if you just rebrighten those low cumulus clouds, stratocumulus clouds, by about 1%. For every percent you rebrighten those clouds, you have twice as big an effect as improving the reflection at the surface. So nature's way of cooling is to regenerate those clouds. And I think there's an opportunity for us to help nature there. And so I think Jonathan's highlighted very accurately the need for reflection. And I'll just point out that reflection at cloud level may be twice as efficient as reflecting at ground level based on the chart that he's using.
Very interesting. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brian. I think, Franz, you have your hand up as well.
I only wanted to mention reflecting from the ground or from lower level has the opportunity that the UV photons, which are also reflected, will do much chemistry in the atmosphere to reduce VOC and
such as methane. Yeah. Yeah. Cleaning the air. This is
you cannot look at all things physically. You also must introduce the chemistry, which happens.
Yeah, this is a thing. It's there's a huge problem with physics, but what about the chemistry as well? Yeah, I've learned so much from Franz, actually. How the air gets cleaned all the time by chemistry, photochemistry. It's UV that does a lot of that. We just take it for granted. You just pollute the air and it just goes somewhere. Who knows where it goes? It gets oxidized in the air. But anyway, okay, thank you, Franz. It's great to keep the chemistry in there. Right, so next thing, we have 15 minutes. And Greg, you wanted to ask a consensus of opinion on ocean iron fertilization.
Right.
The capacity of CO2 sequestration. Yeah.
Yeah. If no one has anything to say about it, that's fine.
Well, I think people always respond when there's controversy, Greg. But anyway, Chris has put up his.
Everybody agrees, I guess, that
Chris knows a lot about this, so Greg. So
it's been put forward as okay. Well, Chris got.
Yep. Okay. Please, Chris.
Well, ocean fertilization has been talked about and experimented to some extent as well for the last 30 years, maybe. And the sort of general scientific consensus is that you could probably remove somewhere between 1 and 5 gigatons of CO2 per year. But in doing that, you'd have to fertilize about 25% of the ocean. Because the best places to do ocean fertilization are those areas of the ocean where the iron is limiting the productivity. So you're adding small amounts of iron, you can generate a lot of productivity. There are people like Peter Fikowski who have a much more bit of an outlier, shall we say, theories about this, who thinks he can potentially remove 60 gigatons per year from a tiny bit of the ocean. And that is a completely unproven technique, although I understand he is planning or attempting to get a permit from the US EPA to carry out a small-scale experiment. I don't know where or any of the details about that. So that would be interesting if he does get a permit to see actually what happens when he tries out his theories.
Yeah. Isn't it possible, Chris, to go to a place where I think we talked about north of Venezuela or the Black Sea, where the bottom of the ocean is just, there's no oxygen there anyway, and just do a huge amount of fertilization and just let it all sink to the bottom? It doesn't matter because there's no oxygen there anyway.
Well, first of all, those areas are not deficient in iron in the first place, so will you get much fertilization anyway?
Okay.
That's the point.
Right.
Yes, but the point of those places you mentioned, they're the places that people are targeting for direct sinking of biomass from things like seaweed, not from ocean fertilization, because you could potentially, and also in the Black Sea, they're talking of sinking of crop waste from, because the area around the Black Sea is a sort of breadbasket of the world almost, and there's massive amounts of crop waste that potentially could be sunk there. That is probably the area that they're looking at for that. They're not looking at those areas for ocean fertilization.
Okay.
It's still a controversial subject. There's still quite a lot needs to be learned about it. There was a US National Academy report a few years ago that suggested a research program that was going to cost some best part, I think, of $500 million, if I remember rightly. I don't know the precise number, but I think it was for like 450 odd million or something over 10 years, not per annum, but even so, a large amount of money, which they suggested would be needed in order to give a full enough information to be able to evaluate it seriously as to whether it was a viable technique or not.
Who was that? Ocean Visions, did you say?
No. This was the US National Academy of Sciences.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Robert, please.
I think with all of these type of questions, there's a problem, which is that there are very strong political barriers to finding out the answers, and it's a new industry, and the profitability, the impact of such a new industry, as likely to be a very big industry, is something that absolutely requires large-scale field testing in order to assess how the Earth system actually responds to these hypothetical scenarios that are under discussion. And I know Chris has pointed out that the London Protocol hasn't actually defined ocean iron fertilization as dumping of waste. But given that the London Protocol's title is about dumping of waste, there's that sort of public perception that it constitutes dumping of waste. And so while you've got these sort of propaganda attacks on new technologies, it's really impossible to assess them properly, and that applies to the range of albedo technologies as well. That large-scale field tests are needed to properly resolve these sorts of questions that Greg has raised.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rob. Robert, Brian, please.
Yeah, it is true that many parts of the subtropical ocean are not characterized as being iron limited. However, such nutrient limitations are always with respect to a particular class of species. And it turns out there are two significant plankton blooms. One is the normal bloom that generally is not iron limited, but there's a second bloom of nitrogen fixing plankton. These are called diazotrophs, and they are much more iron limited. And so it's interesting to consider they actually sequester a much higher ratio of carbon to phosphorus as well. And so there ends up being a bit of a carbon multiplier. And so it's the second bloom, this diazotrophic bloom, that you have to look at iron limitation in ranging parts of the ocean where these diazotrophs or nitrogen fixers could have a significant effect in drawing down super Redfield ratio of carbon. So there's some interesting nuances to the question of iron limitation around the world oceans that should be explored further. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. I'm not sure I quite understood that. So you're saying that there's nitrogen that nitrogen is a limiting nutrient as well, or there's enough iron, but there's not enough nitrogen, and then diazotrophs in these areas have a little bit more iron, they add more nitrogen. Is that what you're saying? I'm not.
Yeah,
Sure.
there are two significant plankton blooms. The first is regular plankton bloom, which in the Pacific Ocean can be largely nitrogen limited for algae. The second bloom is a slower bloom that fixes its own nitrogen, and these are called diazotrophs. They fix their own nitrogen.
Yeah.
They are oftentimes iron limited in parts of the world where the regular plankton blooms are not. What's significant about the diazotrophs is they fix more carbon per unit phosphorus.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And so,
what prevents them from growing there? You say there's a second bloom. Well, why don't they coexist with the first bloom?
well, they do, but what they do is the first bloom soaks up all the nitrogen that's available. And then the second bloom comes along and utilizes the phosphorus, but they probably need some iron to fully utilize the phosphorus. And so they grow more slowly because they have to do more work, but they also fix more carbon
Right.
per
Are you,
unit.
are you saying that because there have been all these sort of field studies where they went off in a boat, but then they had to come back after, as soon as there was a storm or, they ran out of money or something, they were only there for 2 weeks. Are you saying that if they'd stayed for longer, they would have seen these isotrophs,
Well, the typical growth timescale, you generally need about 10 doublings in order to see a bloom. And that can happen in 2 to 4 weeks in regular plankton. And it's not unusual for it to be a 90-day timescale for the case of diazotrophs. So it may require satellite or other groups, other types of observations in order to catch the second and slower bloom that may be more significant in terms of net sequestration of carbon.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Sorry, we're running out of time. Franz, please.
I wanted to say, don't look only to the CO2, which is dumped in the ocean. Look also on the dimethyl sulfide, which produces cloud brightening and new clouds for the reflectivity.
Yeah.
These are both effects.
Yeah, algae are prolific producers of biogenic cloud condensation nuclei, which has a profound effect on restoring really the brightness and extent of marine clouds that contribute to reflectivity, as discussed earlier today.
Yeah, that's right. Great, thank you, Brian. Chris, please.
I should have also said that although the areas of the ocean I said that were iron limited were particularly those which are iron limited all the time, there are, of course, particularly in the temperate regions, seasonal effects where the iron could be limited seasonally because the initial blooms take the iron down, and then there are iron limitations for some areas. For example, this was shown after a volcanic eruption in Iceland dumped some volcanic ash in the North Atlantic, which is not normally considered iron limited, and it had a bloom effect. So that's an example to be aware of, but it is seasonal. The other thing I would say, I don't know much about blooms in the open ocean, but I know about blooms in shelf sea areas, and you don't get 2 blooms. You get a succession of plankton of different types going through the seasons, particularly in Northern Europe, sort of waters starting in probably late March, early April, and you get several different blooms. And basically what happens is the initial bloom takes up quite a lot of the nutrients, and some of the later blooms can't happen until some of the earlier blooms have removed some of the nutrients, not just nitrogen, but phosphorus is another one that actually some species have to have it knocked down to a low level before they can succeed. So it can be quite a complex system. It's not just 2 blooms. In many cases, certainly in shelf seas, you have multiple successive blooms that come along. And then you get in the middle of the summer when all the nutrients have gone down, you get very low productivity until the autumn when you get the rough weather coming along, stirring up the waters and bringing nutrients up from deeper water. And then you have a bloom in the autumn time. That's the sort of temperate water pattern for blooms. Right. The only other thing I should say also is for ocean fertilization, one of the factors that is difficult if you're going to, assuming it's successful, the actual cost of doing the MRV is quite challenging.
This is the monitoring,
monitoring, reporting, and verification.
Yeah.
It's very expensive to do it properly to be able to measure the sequestration. Certainly, that's the general sort of accepted view at the moment. Could change with time, but it's certainly getting better now. For example, with using drones and other, mobile self-driving vehicles underwater, gliders, and everything else, they can help reduce the cost.
That's a great point, Chris. In fact, we have a project underway presently with the Bezos Earth Fund to actually use drones with machine learning to actually estimate the daily growth rate and the daily fall-off rate of seaweed off our platform. And that provides both a biomass fixation figure on a daily basis. And also by measuring differences day to day, we can actually get an estimate on the sedimentation rate, validated with ground truth that we're doing presently in our carbon cycling study, but in the future, a machine learning model could lower the cost of MRV by an order of magnitude, at least for macroalgae, if not for microalgae. I'll also point out, yeah, I agree with you, Chris, it is a succession. It's a simplification to think in terms of two blooms, but I think the succession is the more accurate description. And then I'd like to point out that the whales, we used to have 100 times as many whales as we do now, and the whale poop in the Southern Ocean and in the Arctic had a significant entrainment of a reservoir of carbon, a reservoir of iron, I should say, that was significant for keeping the iron stored in a biological chelated form. First the whale poop, then the algae, and then the krill, and then back to the whales. And as long as the iron is tied up biologically, it remains near the surface. Whereas if it gets into the ocean in raw form, it'll eventually turn into ferric iron, become insoluble, and sink to the bottom of the sea. So the more, the fact that we had 100 times as many whales previously suggests we may have had 2 orders of magnitude higher iron reservoirs in key areas like the Southern Ocean and the Bering Sea than we do today. So that's another significant factor. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Brian. Okay, Sev, I think you were trying to make a point.
Forgot it.
Did I miss
No,
it? Never mind. Sorry about that. Okay. Right. So, right. Thanks everyone for that. We've got last thing. I might almost finish on time. Yeah. Robert, please. Yeah.
So HPAC holds Healthy Planet Action Coalition, which is has the same email address as NOAC, holds fortnightly presentations. And this week, the presentation, Thursday afternoon Eastern Time, Friday morning Australian Time, will be on ocean nanobubbles and buoyant flakes. And Sev Clark, who's here on the meeting, will be the speaker. And it promises to be a very interesting discussion because of the high potential of tiny bubbles of air in the ocean to have protection for biodiversity and broader cooling impacts. Sev, do you want to speak?
No, I think you've summarised it pretty well. The only thing I'd like to say is that there is actually a symbiotic effect of the bubbles and the buoyant flakes. The buoyant flakes slowly release iron, silica, and phosphate to the surface over about a year, which makes the phytoplankton grow. And when the phytoplankton die or degrade, they release surfactants in the upper waters, which actually serve to prolong the life of nanobubbles near the surface from minutes to months. And that's a 35,000 factor improvement, so that you can note, if you have the two together and you put them in the warm ocean currents, you can have this mirror, if you like, the green mirror of the phytoplankton and the white mirror of the bubbles going for thousands of kilometers, cooling the ocean as you go, and at the same time putting a few extra cloud condensation nuclei into the air to make clouds. So you get a double whammy effect.
Great. Are you going to give us some numbers on Thursday?
Yes, but the accurate numbers will have to be done by the models and by real experiments. I've done back of envelope estimates, but it really needs to be tested out.
Right. So it's going to be well worth attending on Thursday.
Good.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Seb, and thanks everyone. As I say, this is going to be made public, and we invite everyone to join the Healthy Planet Action Coalition. This is the website here. send an email to healthyplanetactioncoalition@gmail.com. As you can see, it's all very, very scientific. It's all very technical. But everyone has a day one learning this stuff. I started with, and so we welcome people. And I have with a teacher joining. Sometimes she asks questions. They're not very technical, but they make us all think. We all had to think that time when Ursula asked that question. So that's it. Thank you, everybody. And we're back to our normal closed meeting in 2 weeks' time, and then it'll be public again 2 weeks after that, unless, let's hear comments by email in between. Any last comment from anybody at all? No, don't all rush at once. Thank you then, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Clive.
Bye-bye. Sure.